Now that the back of the wool jacket is sewn together, we're going to prep the hair canvas to be put into it. So the first thing we want to do is what we did like on the front, is mark out the seam allowance or the stitching line on our hair canvas. So you should have 1/2 inch seam allowance. And in the front I had darts, so on the back I actually have a princess seam from the armhole. So I'm marking out that stitching line, which is a 1/2 inch from the cut edge of the princess seam out on this. And to make it easier to line up your stitching lines, mark both sides of your hair canvas. Okay, so the front side and also the back side, mark the seam allowance in it. It will make it a lot easier to line up these seam allowances. So when pinning these together, what you want to do, if you have a princess seam, you'll notice there's going to be some fit. So I'm going to fold back one seam so I can match up my stitching lines exactly because I have both sides marked. And I'm going to pin at the top, in this instance by the armhole. Then I'll move to the bottom of the hair canvas, fold back there so I can see both my stitching lines. And I'll line them up and make sure everything is nice and even. Okay, and then I'll pin here as well. Okay, the reason I'm pinning the two ends is because there's fit in here. So that means I have a little bit of ease. You can see how my hair canvas is actually bending a little bit or pulling. Okay, one side is a little longer than the other because I have ease in there. So once I've pinned both sides, what I'll do is I'm going to do my best to ease using the pins, ease the fit in there, or spread that ease evenly throughout. Okay, be careful. Again, these aren't stay stitched, so be careful not to stretch them or anything like that. They can stretch just as easily as your wool or any other fabric. But as you can see, I'm just maneuvering my ease throughout the seam and trying to get it as even as possible. All right, so it might mean adjusting pins. Once you have it all pinned, you might have to take some out and then readjust. But this looks pretty good. Okay, so that is pinned together. And again, I lined up stitching line right on top of stitching line. And I want it to be perfect. So I'm just going to adjust this a little bit here. And there we go. So this side is now ready to go. Once they're all pinned together, go ahead and do a running basting stitch right through the line, that stitching line that you drew on there. And as you can see, I'm just basting right through there. And this will make it much easier to sew, and it's holding it together. Okay, so you'll do this on both pieces. It's also, you can look at the back of it and you can see if that basting is going through the line on both sides. You can see in this case it is, so I know that everything's lined up exactly how it should be. And now I can just cut this and it's ready to sew. Okay, once you've basted them together, go ahead and sew it. Again, I'm going to do a zigzag here, but you can do a straight stitch as well. It doesn't really matter. And back tack beginning and end. And be careful when stitching because, again, you haven't stay stitched armholes or necklines or any of the curves, and you really don't want that to stretch out. So be careful, but go ahead and stitch them together. And once we do that, we'll trim out the seam allowances. Alright, now that they are stitched together, let's trim the seam allowances down. So I have a 1/2 inch. I'm going to trim it down to 1/4. Again, the hair canvas can fray and disintegrate easily, so don't trim it too close to your stitching line. I like to leave 1/4. And that's another reason I like to do the zigzag. Okay, it tends to come out it doesn't come out as easier if I straight stitch it, but again, straight stitching is fine. If you leave 1/4, you should be totally fine. So remember, we just overlap these to stitch them together. So you want to trim back the seam allowances on both sides to 1/4, not just the side you're looking at. So do the front and then the back. Okay? And once we've done that, we're ready to install it into the wool.